What is up, Quick fans? Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm talking about the brand new Hulu series that is Looking for Alaska. Now, normally I do non-spoiler reviews only, but since I'm later than I usually am on a review like this, I am starting out with a spoiler-free review. I'm going to give you guys my score right in the middle of the video, and then we're going to move into spoilers because there are some things I want to talk about. I need your comments down below. Did this show deliver? And how was the book? If you read it, let's get into it. So based on the book written by John Green, premiering on Hulu this past weekend, this is Looking for Alaska. A new arrival at a boarding school falls in love with a beguiling female student. So the whole sadness and blowing my nose thing at the beginning of this review was factual. I mean, this is a very deep and emotional series. Not going to mention why it's emotional just yet, but I want to give you guys some broad thoughts before we get into spoilers. So Looking for Alaska really did start out as something that I was familiar with, and I was afraid it was going to go in the typical and cliche. I feel like that's my line that I normally say in a review like this, typical and cliche, but it really did feel like this schmaltzy, melodramatic teenage drama that I have issues with just because I've seen it done so many times, and a lot of the times the execution is completely sloppy. You look at a show like 13 Reasons Why, while it started out on a really good note, it continued season after season, and it just it went downhill quality-wise. Now, not everyone is going to agree with that, but I was looking for Alaska to kind of capitalize on what it was going for at the beginning, but provide us something different. Give us an extra layer of emotion, which it absolutely does. But the thing I want to start out talking about is the quality of the show. This is so well done. It is so well shot, so well directed, and while the melodrama is in there, and clearly certain characters in here, well, the majority of the characters in here think that certain things are more important than they actually are when they're out of high school, and that's the way I'm going to put it. Now, that's the case with most of the shows in this vein where they are portraying high schoolers, and that's kind of how it was for me. You know, I thought things mattered in high school, and then I got into the real world, and it's a lot tougher than high school. That's what I'll say. And there is that element of, whoa, poor us in this show. And I thought it was going to go on. I thought it was going to drag itself out. But while it was present, it did not annoy me like it normally would, because you start to actually really care about these characters because they truly believe in what they believe in this show. And they're all just trying to find their place, trying to find their way. Even those who look like they're not struggling as much as character A, well, character B, they're still struggling. They're just struggling in a different way. It does not matter what your background is. If you come from a family with money, there are still struggles to be had, and struggles that all of these students relate to with each other. And then some are just struggling with things that you don't expect. And when they sit down and they share their stories with each other, you truly get emotional towards that. And when that started to come about, and I believe it even started in episode 1 after I was rolling my eyes for 5 minutes going, this is going to turn into something that I don't like. It did not do that. It transcended what we see, you know, in a typical Nicholas Sparks film. Very different, but it handled emotion and tragedy and character development in a way that, frankly, blew me away. And I don't mean that as this is the most high-quality show I've seen all year, but it's up there. Handling source material like this, source material that is so well regarded with so many people who read the book. And I'll say this, I did not read the book. I knew, kind of, what was going to happen. You know, I saw there are some predictable elements for sure, and you can see, not the end of the show, but you can see the turning point of the show coming, sort of. But still, it's all about how you handle it. It's about the execution. And when the turning point of the show happens, you're locked in. I don't care who you are. If you are watching this show and you don't care at all through the first 4 or 5 episodes, you will get to the episode that I'm talking about, and it will get to you. One of the characters, in some way, that will get to you, and it will start to break you down emotionally. And this show does a wonderful job of handling all of those things, and it really is just kind of a very similar yet different coming-of-age story. It handles tragedy in a way that, most shows just don't approach. It breathes new life into this genre, and it does not bring you that ridiculously over-the-top evil teacher character. It does not bring you the friend that is one way, and they're only that way throughout the entire series. No, every character in here is dynamic, and there's not one evil character, right? Some characters are portrayed as evil, but you learn why they feel the way they feel. And when tragedy strikes, it does a wonderful job of showing everyone coming together and just feeling real. This show feels so real, and I questioned that at first, and I shouldn't have questioned that, but going in, I'm like, this is just going to be another, and it wasn't. It transcended that. It transcended what I predicted. It transcended everything that I assumed it would be going in. And for those that have read the book, you knew what this was going to be, and you knew how well written this was. I want to give kudos to John Green for just bringing us some incredible source material. My goodness, I actually want to read the book now. My wife has read the book, and she was telling me how wonderful it was, and how her and her dad kind of felt the same way emotionally that I felt watching the series before reading the book. And now that I know that it's such a wonderful source material, I want to go back and revisit and see how things differ. But just seeing the show, I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe they captured what they were trying to capture here very well. And like I said, it's all about teenagers trying to find themselves in this world, each character struggling with something different. You have Kristine Froseth playing the character of Alaska Young, Charlie Plummer, who I'm a big fan of, playing the character of Miles, Timothy Simmons as the Eagle. And at first you're like, oh, the Eagle is this imposing character and he just stands for one thing, but like I said before, this show transcends that. You learn to grow at least a respect for every single character. You have Ron Jones playing Dr. Hyde, and he is one of Luke Cage fame, and two, he is that teacher, the cooler teacher. Maybe the students don't know it at first, but once you have a conversation with the guy, he really is a wonderful addition to this cast. I was questioning him at first, but the more you learn about him, fleshing out almost every character in this show, the more you care, and that's how I felt about everyone. And we cannot forget about the Colonel, played by Denny Love, and I've never really seen the guy in much, but he was the standout for me. His emotion in this show, how he handles certain elements of the plot that we'll get into here later, his emotion is top-notch, and when he lets things out, you care for him. You care for this group. And I know it's the cliche, we're the group, we stand for something, we will not betray our friends, we don't believe in rats. And they say it all throughout the show. If you're a rat, then we're going to cast you out, right? And the Colonel's mother says it at one point. It's kind of the same way I feel. It's like your teenage issues, what you're feeling right now, in the long run, it does not matter. Treat people with respect. But the further you go with these characters and the more you start to relate to their situations, you buy the fact that they feel this way because they truly care about each other. They're in their groups for sure, but at the end of the day, it all comes to a head. And I'm kind of done talking about non-spoilers. I want to get into the spoiler section of this review just to hit on a few things. I am going to go an 86% with my score. The more I think about it, the more I like it. One of the higher scores I've given in quite some time of the weekend shows, and there were so many shows that came out this weekend that I really loved. Not movies in particular, but shows. This is the highest score I've given. I thought this was a wonderful weekend for streaming. You have Living With Yourself on Netflix, Modern Love on Prime, and now Looking for Alaska on Hulu. And it might just be the best thing I've seen this weekend. And I can't believe I'm saying that because this is not a genre that I normally gravitate towards. Okay, and the episode where the inevitable thing happens that I kind of predicted to happen. The character of Alaska, the show is called Looking for Alaska, so you obviously know that there's going to be some sort of tragedy there. And since we're talking spoilers, Alaska does die in this show. And the way that they handled this and the way that they showcased these students really just putting forward their grief in all sorts of ways and dealing with this tragedy, it was just wonderful. And I don't mean wonderful in a fun way. I mean wonderful in just a purely well-executed, believable way. You could sense the humanity in every single person, even the students that did not necessarily get along with Alaska, that called her out for being the rat. She was the rat. She had her own reasoning for being the rat, but even they are just stricken with grief, and grief really brings everyone together in this show. And of course, it's going to separate close friends and people really close to the situation, but I'm talking about those random students that played no part in this show. Even they were just mourning after this character of Alaska, and it just kind of hit on Alaska Young. She really was. She was a character that was kind of frustrating me at first, because I'm just like, you're leading him on. And then you learn more about her, and you learn her past, and you understand why she's acting the way that she does, and how she just doesn't really understand herself yet. I mean, these are kids. They're young. They all don't understand. But her in particular, she dealt with something that not a lot of other people have to deal with. And it's so heartbreaking to see. And once you start learning her story about her mother, and you see these things progress, at first I'm like, you're leading miles on, and I don't like what you're doing. And just the way you talk about certain things, I'm just like, oh, it's frustrating. But then you learn more about her, and you're like, I understand. And I understood why she did what she did, rushing towards her mother's grave to kind of mourn her on the day that she ended up, her life was taken from her so tragically. And we still don't know exactly what her intentions were that night, why she was driving so fast. And they leave that open on purpose, of course. I think that comes down to John Green and how wonderful he is. But these are just things that these students had to deal with, and the final 2 episodes was really just a showcase of grief. And even the teacher, even the eagle, after they pull that giant prank at the end. And I was unsure where the final episode was headed, because I'm like, we've already dealt with the tragedy, and we kind of need to wrap things up. And I expected it to be a much nicer wrap-up, but I'm glad we got what we got. We got a scene that was just pure joy and happiness for these students when the stripper comes into the school and he acts like he's giving the speech, and he starts taking his clothes off, and the students do the same. It really was a very Alaska move, and there are just so many emotional moments in that final episode. But when the students learn what actually happened and how they all handle it, and they're all breaking down, and then you get the Colonel's breakdown in the scene with Dr. Hyde at the dinner table, I just thought that's what I was talking about earlier, the range of emotion from him. I'm like, golly. And these are kids, doing very kid things, but they are handling their emotions in a way that you expect them to handle it. They're still learning about themselves, and to be stricken with tragedy like this was just it's heartbreaking, man. And this is a show with so many layers that I did not expect, and that's why I gravitated towards it more than I expected to, because it handled things that normally a show will botch. This show did not do that, and handled them with respect. It was a very respectable show. A few awkward moments when they're watching the porn together, but I want to give this a high recommendation towards you guys. I already gave my score. It's a very well-executed show, and one that I would say is probably the best one I've seen on Hulu all year. Great stuff. I can't wait to recommend this to a lot of people. So thank you so much for watching this review. A bit longer than I normally do it, but I combine a non-spoiler with a spoiler, and we have so many things to talk about this week. Like I said, Jojo Rabbit, The Lighthouse, so many movies dropping in theaters, and then Dolomite Is My Name on Netflix. You guys are the best. I'll see you soon. Oh, God, I'm a horrible actor.